Listener discretion advised.
If you've been affected by the rampant opioid epidemic, as we have, then this podcast is for you. We want to bring hope to those suffering from heroin addiction and shed light on its darkness. Let's share an environment where we can discuss all aspects of heroin addiction without shame or judgment. Our mission is to educate the community about heroin and its deadly sidekick, fentanyl. How easy it is to get, how easy it is to become addicted, the latest treatments, and its newest targets. JCF is a nonprofit organization created to honor the life of Jeremy Castro, who passed away from a fentanyl overdose in 2017. Now, my family and I are doing our part to combat this opioid epidemic. I'm Rebecca Castro. I lost my brother and many friends to heroin, and I made this show to demand eradication of this epidemic. Let's do this.
So today I have with us John. He is a recovering heroin addict. Hi, John. Thanks for being with us.
No problem. Hello.
Okay, I want to talk to you about how you got involved with drugs. And can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe, cover how you grew up, that type of thing?
Sure. Well, I grew up in kind of a unique environment. Half Asian, half American, and we live in a wealthy suburb, but we were a poor family. So I was, different from the other kids, but I managed to get along with everybody. But at home was a different story. I lived on the Asian side, my mom's side of the family. I lived with my grandparents, and they were really strict. Very strict traditional Asian, and I wasn't allowed to go out and play very much. I had friends, of course, but I spent very little time with them outside of school. And, it led to a lot of loneliness. I spent a lot of time by myself, and I studied. I enjoyed reading books, but I always felt like I was missing something. And, of course, I chased after my father and my brother, who lived with my mom in a different house. And, being a young kid, I wanted to be with my real family. And while I was loved by my grandparents, I wanted my real parents. I wanted approval from my father, and he was actually pretty abusive. So the time I spent with him, I was actually, getting abused. Every once in a great while, I'd spend the night, and maybe for attention, I would talk back when they were yelling at me or something like that, and I would get hit. Mm-hmm. And it was, really lonely. So I just did anything I could for attention. But as I got older, I started to get more and more with my friends, and I would sneak out of the house, and kind of act out. Mm-hmm. But still, I always felt when I got home, I just always felt depressed. I think around 7 years old, I remember my family going to Hawaii, my mom, my dad, and my brother, and they left me. And to this day, I don't understand why. I never brought it up to them, but I remember wishing I was dead. I remember being so upset about it and so left out.
Yeah.
But finally, I started spending time with my father more, and I realized he didn't really care about us. He cheated on my mother. He would drop me off and go to his girlfriend's house, or he would take me to his girlfriend's house, and I would watch TV, and he would go in the bedroom. And a lot of that stuff affected me psychologically a lot.
Yeah, and I can imagine.
Yeah.
So this was when you were still a child, 7 years old, you said?
Yeah, it started very young. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm wondering, did you ever get treatment for any type of behavior bad behavior that you may have displayed?
Um, they, my family, especially the Asian side, they like to believe that things should be left alone. It's a sign of weakness. My mother was diagnosed with OCD, and
Mm-hmm.
they never got treated for it. They believe in Eastern medicine, like herbal medicines and praying, but they don't believe in Western practice doctors. They don't believe in therapists.
Okay.
So she never got help, and they never even noticed anything wrong with me,
Right.
and that was a
Yeah.
lot to do with just being left alone. So
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me,
I,
how were your middle school years?
middle school, I started to become, I think, a lot worse. I got in with the wrong crowd. I got in a lot of fights. I I fit in school really well.
Okay.
Like I think that's maybe when my bipolar came out. Like I was a really different person at school, but when I came home, it was just you know completely quiet, nothing to do, and just really like
Wow.
missing something.
Yes. Well,
Um,
that's got to be rough on any kid, you know?
So my brother, he was playing like a special game. It was a card game that he actually ended up going to tournaments and traveling in, and he's 3.5 years older than me. So he was traveling around, like he went to New York, he went to Texas by himself, and he made all
Wow.
this money before he was 18, and I looked up to him. And he would,
Sure.
sometimes come home drunk, just like throwing up, he smoked cigarettes, and I looked up to him, so I started smoking cigarettes. I would steal cigarettes, and I started with that. I started
Right.
drinking, and by eighth grade was the first time I tried marijuana,
Right.
and I enjoyed it. I didn't realize the addictive traits were already showing, but I just liked the feeling of escaping reality, of just
Right.
not feeling anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So then you went into high school, and can you tell us how you were introduced to heroin and at what age?
Um, Heroin, I didn't get into it until I was 19, but what I was into a lot in high school were pills. Like hydrocodone, is also an opiate,
Yes,
and
it is.
it's very much similar to heroin. I was
Mm,
big on that. I was big on everything. I would whatever was there, I would do that in high school. But
mm-hmm.
heroin, I got introduced to that by a girlfriend. She I hadn't known that she had tried heroin, but she brought home something called a morphine pop, and it was actually a fentanyl lollipop. And this was a long time ago. This is
Wow.
before anyone knew what fentanyl was and how dangerous it was,
Right.
And I not knowing any better, and just wanting to enjoy it with my girlfriend, I tried it, and it I felt really sick. I mean, it got me sick, but it was somewhat enjoyable. But
Mm-hmm.
I got angry. We got in a big fight, and I ended up trying it with my friend one day. I decided I would try black tar heroin. So I called one of my old friends I grew up with that I knew, and he invited me over, of course. And when I got there, he was shooting up, and that
Mm.
just blew my mind. That scared me because I was afraid of needles, and seeing
Mm.
that, like, I really had second thoughts, but I still ended up smoking it. It wasn't peer
Mm.
pressure or anything. It was,
Right.
I was curious, and he just shared it with me, and
Okay.
I
So
just
you didn't
kept,
start
yeah.
shooting up, did you? Right
No,
then and there? Okay.
no. For like a long time, I thought smoking heroin was no big deal. Like you wouldn't get addicted, you wouldn't get sick, you'd be perfectly fine as long as you don't shoot up. I
Right.
started to get really, really sick. My tolerance built up to the point where I was spending $200 every day and a half or 2 days
Right. And where were you
smoking it.
getting this money?
I was working to support
Mhm.
my habit, and
Mhm.
no matter what, when it came down to it, if it wasn't enough, I would borrow money from my relatives, and I would pay them
Right.
back when I could. And then it got to
Okay.
the point where I couldn't pay them back. But
Yeah.
after my tolerance had gotten to that point, one of my friends, who is now also overdosed and passed away, he told me, "Why don't you just start injecting it?" And I still was against it, but he told me, he's like, "You're spending so much money, $200 every 2 days, when you could be spending like $20 a day." So
Wow.
I gave in. I gave in and I injected it, and he was right. I mean, I saved a lot of money, but of course, not knowing what I was doing, I blew out all my veins, and I was very lucky. You know,
Mhm.
not being experienced, not knowing what you're doing, you can hit an artery. Like for example, if your hand swells up and if you have a ring on it, you could actually have it amputated just because of the circulation cut off. Because when you
Wow.
hit an artery, it puffs up right away, whatever area it is. So
Right.
there's
So who
there's a
who
lot.
taught you how to inject? Did he show you how to do it? Did you
The
just
first time
experiment by
my
yourself?
friend the first time my friend did it for me, and then
Oh,
after that it was kind of hit or miss. I practiced. I just kept
right.
doing it until I got it right.
And so
It's
where were you living
yeah.
at this time? Were you still at home or did you have your own
Yeah.
place?
Um I was living in Burbank with my girlfriend. We had our own apartment, but after we
Okay.
broke up, I had moved back home, and my
Okay.
parents had a big falling out. My father found a permanent girlfriend, basically. He moved
Right.
to Agora, and my mother became a live-in nanny with my brother. So I
Okay.
had their house all to myself, and it was
Okay.
like that for years. So I
Perfect
ended
opportunity
up,
to use, right?
yeah, and
Mhm.
it was basically I had a lot of good friends, and I reached out to them to try to get help. They knew I had a problem. I would disappear for because I needed to fix, and I didn't want to do it in front of them. And
Yeah.
everyone knew. They tried to help, and eventually they gave up.
Mhm.
You can only do so much for someone that doesn't want help.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was a difficult time for me. It was a really dark time. I feel like heroin just took the color out of my life. when
Wow.
when I had the money, when I had the heroin, I would just stay in bed all day. Like I stopped eating. I would eat maybe snacks or one meal a day,
Mhm.
because like alcohol, you could trick your body into thinking that you're full. And it's the same with heroin. If you have enough heroin, you don't need to really eat. And I preferred my drugs over food when it came down to it. If
Right.
if my money was low. So being at my house alone, I ended up losing all my friends.
Yeah.
My fellow users, they're the good ones are few and far between. Everyone steals from each other. They like screw you over in some kind of way. Like you invite them over, they'll steal something from your house,
Wow.
or if
Mhm.
you can't get some drugs and you try to ask them to help you, like sell you some or pull your money together, they end up shorting you. And that's how it was.
Right.
There was a couple people that managed to stay honest. That drug is evil. It changes good people into really evil people,
Right.
where they'll burn every bridge. They'll take as much as they can from
Right.
from their families, from their best friends, everything.
Right.
And yeah, I only knew a couple people that were honest
Right.
and stayed that way.
So how long were you injecting heroin?
Out of 11 years of using, I smoked for about 6.5 to 7, and the remainder of that was injecting.
Wow.
So yeah, about 4 years.
Right. Did you ever overdose
Um,
at any
it's
point?
hard to say. There's actually sometimes you can overdose. You stop breathing in your sleep and
Right.
you wake up. There was times where I woke up and I was gasping for air, and talking to my friends about it, they told me it was an overdose, but I actually came to. But I never overdosed to the point where I had to be revived. But
Okay.
it's kind of what had expected. I had written notes for
Mhm.
all my loved ones. I left it
Mhm.
in my room, and I locked the door. I kept to myself. I didn't want them to see me like that, because I knew I was gonna die, and I was just waiting for it.
Wow.
I I with my depression, it wasn't just wishing I was dead when I was 7. I attempted suicide several times. And by the time I got into heroin and I realized I had a problem, by the time I realized I was in too deep, it's it's not just pride. You don't realize that you can't do it on your own. I justified it by telling myself that I got myself into this mess, so I have to figure a way out of it. So I didn't
Right.
want to get my family involved. And then I resigned myself. I thought there's no saving me. So, I would try to preach to my friends, tell them they should stay clean or they should get clean. They have so much potential, but it's over for me. And I believed it. That's
Right.
truly how I felt.
Well,
Like
that's
I ruined any opportunity I had. I threw everything away. I wasted so much time.
right. Well, that's sad. So you said you attempted suicide. When was your first attempt? How old were you?
Uh, my first attempt, I think I was about 16 at the time.
You were in high school?
And yeah, and I just remember I used to, like after the Columbine shooting and all that, there was
Right.
the Adam song by Blink 182, and I
Okay.
heard that people would listen to that song and commit suicide. And I
Oh,
remember having that on repeat, and I wanted to do the same thing. So I stole a bottle of sleeping pills from a store, a Rite Aid, and I
okay.
swallowed all the pills. And I went to sleep thinking I wasn't gonna wake up, but I woke up the next day, and my family noticed I was really pale. I could barely walk, but I didn't die.
Right. Well,
And
I would call
I
that
was
an overdose,
Yeah, it was,
you
I
know.
mean, I guess I was fortunate, I felt like I was being punished, like I wasn't, the torment wasn't done yet.
Right.
And this was well before, even heroin. So by the time I got to heroin, I just wanted to end it. So I did, people say hot shots, like,
Mhm.
because you never know what what quality the next amount you get is. You
Right.
can get some really weak, but the next one could be the one that kills you.
Right.
And I had wished for that. I put so much into the spoon, and I would try to inject it in the hopes that I would just end everything,
Mm.
because I was so ashamed of myself. I
Yeah.
had I had all these jobs that I couldn't keep, and I started off with great jobs. I was going to school full time, I was working full time, and it got to the point where I was working at, fast food restaurants for a couple months, and I couldn't keep up because I was such a heavy addict that I would need to fix every couple hours.
Right. To keep from
And
getting sick?
yeah, well, a lot of it's psychological too, but
Mhm.
for me, I got really sick, like to the point where I throw up bile, and it's just miserable. It's people say you feel like you're gonna die, but you're not gonna. But
Yeah.
I couldn't hold anything down. the worst feeling in the world. It's
I know.
nothing like the flu. Like, you'd give anything to make that pain go away.
Right.
So
Well, that's why
it
so
went.
many people, I'm sorry, that's why so many
Uh-huh.
addicts, put off trying to get clean because the
Right.
process is absolutely torture, right?
Uh-huh. And it takes a grip of your brain. It really does. You always tell yourself, like, you prepare for your last time. Like, this is
Mhm.
going to be my last hurrah. And you stock up, you get a whole lot, you have a party or whatever, and then the next day you do it again. You
Wow.
never stick to your promises because you never, they say you're not done until you're done. Like, everybody's rock bottom is different. And,
Right.
I went through a lot of rough times, but with my depression, I felt like I couldn't get any lower, and
Right.
I've learned there was things way worse than death finally. I lost
Yeah.
a lot of friends to, excuse me, I lost a lot of friends to overdoses, and, you know, it's
Right.
not
S-
it's not something that should happen around here. I
No.
remember as a child, we had an arcade nearby, and parents would petition because they thought it was bad for the kids. But what
Yeah.
they didn't realize is there's nothing to do out here.
Right.
So, even to go watch a movie or something, you have to get on the freeway. And as a kid, it's hard to get a ride.
That's very
So,
true.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
so kids would just throw parties. We'd go to parties, and then, parties led to drugs.
Mhm. So at any time when you were using so heavily and
hmm
hoping you would die, did your family know that you had an addiction problem? Did anybody know?
Um, I think I think they had an idea, but when you love someone, and I think especially as a parent, if you don't have that solid proof you love them so much, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
So
I
they never
remember,
asked you?
um, I, I would deny it. I would change the subject. I would get angry. I remember one time my brother saw my arms. I was wearing a tank top, and I had track marks.
Mhm.
And he said something, and I told him, I made up a story. I told him that I donate blood a lot.
Okay.
Like, yeah,
Mhm.
so, I just came up with whatever excuse I could. And,
Yeah.
it was not something I was willing to talk about. I got really angry when they brought it up. So they just kind of gave up. And
Right.
eventually, I stopped seeing my nieces and my nephew. I spent very little time with my family. I
Mhm.
wasn't invited to get togethers.
Oh. Well, that's kind of
And
sad.
yeah, it was
Then.
something I brought on myself.
Mhm.
With heroin, I would always show up late, because I'd have to fix before I can go. And by that
Mhm.
time, I was a wreck. I taught myself how to shoot up, so all my
Right.
veins were shot. I couldn't it I had to poke and prod around with a needle just to find somewhere where I could actually shoot up.
So your
And
veins in your arms were blown out?
yeah, I mean, people tie off. I never learned how to tie off. Like, there's no training for shooting up, so
Right.
you just kind of go by it. I never did that. I got very shaky, especially when I was sick, and you get really anxious
Yeah.
because when you're sick, you just can't control it. I'm my dexterity, like, very I'm pretty high strung, I guess I'd say. So I get shaky pretty easily. So
Okay.
that's why, holding a needle, you have to hold it perfectly in place with the vein.
Right.
And if you miss, you know, um, the consequences from that, I remember one time in jail, I saw someone show me he had an abscess. And people, they're too scared to go to the doctor to get medical attention because they think the police are getting involved.
Right.
His chest was caved in on one side. They had to cut all. It wasn't just the skin. It was a huge portion of his actual body. They had to cut all the dead tissue around it,
Wow.
and it's it looked terrible and it was
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. So
I have
what put you in jail, if you don't
the
mind me
the
asking?
first time I got arrested, my dealer had actually got busted, I guess, and
Mhm.
they did a two-way sting operation. So what they did was they took his phone, and any person that called that wanted to pick up,
Right.
they would tell them to meet, and the police would be there. Undercover agent sold to me, and then he gave the signal, and a bunch of police came out and they arrested me. And I remember feeling like trash, feeling like the scum of the earth. There's people
Right.
recording. It was at a gas station, and there was so many like detectives and two squad cars there just for me. It made me look like I was just picking up drugs. It made me feel like I was Scarface or something. It was
Right.
humiliating.
And
And
how
that's
old were
when
you?
that
How at
then
that time?
I was probably 24, I think.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. And back then any amount of heroin was a felony automatically.
Sure.
My I called my family and they bailed me out, of
Mhm.
course.
Is
I was
is that when they
working.
first learned officially that you were using
Yeah.
heroin?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
when they had confirmation because when they talked to the bondsman, they went over the charges, and my charges were attempted possession of heroin. So they
Wow.
found out. Um,
Okay.
they, wanted to help me. I refused to go to rehab. I said I didn't need it, and I don't think they understood the severity of my addiction. I
Right.
lost my dealer, and I managed to get by somehow, just to not be sick. I call friends and they'd help me out, or just whatever I can get. And
Mhm.
my family this whole time, they thought I was getting clean because I was still pretty sick. And it was an opportunity for me. The judge was really lenient. He gave me deferred entry of judgment, which was you complete certain conditions and they take it off your record because it's a
Oh,
felony. Yeah.
right.
So I did a class, and it was a joke back then. I did a class online, and I
Oh
did
my
my
God.
paperwork. Yeah, I did my
Mhm.
paperwork. I sent it in, and then after a couple months, the judge dismissed it, and the felony was taken off my record.
Wow.
And
That's
after that, I,
incredible.
I thought I'm not gonna do it anymore. And within a matter of days, I was back at it. It
So
got
you
to the
found a
point.
new dealer?
Yeah, I found a new dealer. It was really inconsistent, but finally I found a friend who introduced me to the dealer that I was eventually going to be federally indicted with.
Mm.
And
You
how that's how I met him, the delivery service.
right.
So I
Right.
met him through a friend, and he had, high, we would say high quality. So
Okay.
I was happy.
Right.
I finally found a consistent dealer, and
Right.
it made things easier for me.
So when did you meet Jeremy? I understand you were friends or acquaintances.
Yeah, Jeremy, it was, kind of strange. I met him when I was working at a smoke shop, but we went in the same circles. So I probably saw him at parties. We just
Okay.
never we just never really talked one-on-one level. He looked familiar,
Right.
like we seemed like we recognized each other. but also he saw my arms.
Mhm.
And I think people that are similar, especially people that do drugs, they're attracted to each other. They
Yeah.
just you
Of
just kind of
course.
gravitate towards each other. Yeah.
Of
So
course.
so we talked a little bit. He bought a couple cigarettes because we sold singles there, and
Okay.
I believe his father was outside with him. I think he drove him there to get cigarettes. So, I was a little suspicious at first when I met him, because
Mhm.
he asked me if I still mess around, and I didn't know what to say, so I just kind of, stayed polite. But I worked there, and he'd come by more and more frequently, and finally we started talking, and that's when I realized, like, we had the same friends and who he was,
Right.
and we started to hang out every now and then. He told
Mhm.
me his story about, how you had saved his life, and I thought that was amazing. I thought, wow, like, what are the chances if,
Right.
you know, because it it's only a matter of minutes. I believe 7 minutes is it? You get permanent brain damage or you're brain dead. I'm
Yeah.
not sure the exact facts, but it's definitely a time limit. I mean, they have to work really fast to save someone's life and
They
have them
did.
not have damage.
They did.
And
Yeah. They actually
yeah,
revived him, brought him back
yeah,
to
and that was
life.
and that was a miracle because to me, because my friend that introduced me to delivery service, he had because he had already been arrested. I talked him into going to treatment, but when he came out, he overdosed and died. And they're not sure if it was suicide or not. But
Oh.
with Jeremy's case, it was so inspiring. I thought because he was telling me he wanted to be an EMT, and I was
Right.
like, wow, here's this guy that had his life saved, and now he wants to change from being, a drug addict to saving lives.
Right.
And and Jeremy was one of those few people, he wasn't a greedy drug addict that would steal from people. Like, you could just tell he was a genuine person. And
Right.
so it was like kind of like a kindred spirit is how I felt. So I
Mhm.
enjoyed talking to him a lot, hanging out,
Mhm.
not just like doing drugs and then going about our way. We had long talks.
Yeah.
I remember I remember one time I was just really, really down in the dumps. My grandfather told me to go kill myself. Um, it's a really long story, but
Yeah.
basically he didn't mean it. He was angry. I had asked him to borrow money, and I had went too far because I was unemployed for a couple months at the time, and the money
Right.
added up. So I was, feeling like I really wanted to die again. And I
Right.
had told Jeremy about my attempted suicides. And I told
Yeah.
him, like, because he was telling me about rehab and how he's been. And,
Right.
he told me that there's hope and that, like, he was going to help me to try to get into a rehab. And that was the plan. But I think I'm not sure exactly what happened, but he ended up getting caught maybe by you guys and sent to rehab.
That
And
happened.
yeah, so then he went to rehab, and I kind of lost touch with him, and
Mhm.
then he came back out. We
Yeah.
didn't really talk much when he got his phone back in rehab. Um, I just remember when he did contact me, I just remember, telling him, like, please let this be the last time, like, don't ever look back. And
Mhm.
I would tell that to my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish it on anyone because
Right.
it consumes you. It really does.
Yeah, of course it
And
does. It
yeah,
becomes your
and
life, you know?
it does. It's more, takes everything from you. and you
Right.
don't realize how it affects your family. I always thought, it's my life, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize how much I was hurting my family. They're arguing about money because they're having more money problems, and it was all my fault. Uh, Flash forward a couple months later, Jeremy got out of treatment, and he got in touch with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he asked me if I was still using and if I could sell some. And of course, my first thought was no. So I told him I can't. I told him, you need to stay clean, and like don't do this to yourself. Don't do this anymore. And
Right.
I knew you guys were loving parents, and you guys were doing everything you could. And rehab, private insurance rehab, is expensive. You guys
Right.
were doing a lot for him. So I tried to tell him that, but also I I could only do so much. He kept asking, and finally I gave in. Thinking
Yeah.
thinking I was helping a friend or whatever. I wasn't thinking at all. Maybe
Right.
I should have. So many regrets looking back. But yeah, he asked me if I could sell him at least $30 worth, and I said I'll give you 20. And he said
Okay.
okay. He came to my house. We talked for a couple minutes, and I gave it to him, and he was kind of in a rush to go home. So we just said talk to you later, said our goodbyes, and I didn't hear from him. And my first thought was good for you, like I thought, it that was it for him. Maybe that was his last last hurrah, and that he was gonna stay clean. And
Well,
then
it was his last hurrah, for
yeah, it's
sure. So I have to
um
ask you, were you dealing at the time? I mean, is that
no.
why he came to you?
No, I hated dealing. I absolutely hated dealing. I didn't talk to anyone. I was pretty much a loner. The reason why Jeremy asked me is because we did hang out, and when he couldn't get it, he would call me, and when I couldn't get it, I would call him. But he went with me a couple times to meet up with the delivery service, and he recognized that it was good quality. He said he liked it a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which is why he asked me if I could sell him some. He knew it was my personal stash. I was in no way a dealer. I wouldn't sell to anyone. I never put myself out there, but I did have close friends that I didn't really hang out with, just barely. Every once in a great while, they would ask me if they could get some because they're sick, they're hurting. And, when you hear that, you think you're helping them out.
Right.
And so that's what we did for each
Right.
other.
Mm-hmm.
We helped each other out,
So is that
or so we
common
thought.
amongst users where you just front each other small
Um,
amounts and
it's it's really common for people to pull their money together. Like,
mm-hmm.
they call it hustling. Everyone has their own ways of getting money, like panhandling. I had a friend who would, sit in front of stores and beg people for money, and there's days he'd make 100, almost $200 a day just begging for money out here.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone had their own ways to make money, but
Right.
the
So
more money you pull together, the more amount you get. If you only have $20 worth, they're not going to give you extra. So the more money you have, they throw in a little extra for you. Or if you
right,
introduce someone, they give you a bonus, which is how
right.
the dealers work because they want more customers.
Ugh, yeah. So Jeremy came to you that night, and what happened after that?
So after that, I hadn't heard from him for a couple of days, but I remembered he was looking for meth again, and I came in contact with a friend that I went to high school with that I hadn't talked to in a long time, and he was talking about how they were waiting for a meth dealer, and I texted Jeremy and said, "Hey, I could get this for you," and he never responded. And then on the 5th of May, or yeah, I was pulled over with my mother in the car after coming back from picking up drugs. We were going to get food, and I was pulled over by the police. And I was a wreck already. You know, I was driving with a suspended license, no insurance, and expired registration. So I knew I was in for it,
Right.
but I had no idea what was going on. So he was certain that I was on drugs for from the get-go. So I already was kind of suspicious. He asked to search my car. I said no. My mother was terrified. I tried to keep my mom calm. Finally, I said, no, you can't search my car, and he arrested me, he said, under suspicion of being under the influence. And so he took me to the station and took me into first he did a urine test to see, I guess, what drugs I had in my system. And then he took me into like an interview room, which was just, a blank room with a steel table, and he chained me to the table and left me there.
You had no idea what was going on?
No, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I was so confused. I thought, I didn't know, I had only been arrested one time before, and that was in LA County. So I thought maybe this was a different way. Maybe they're waiting to transfer me out. But all of a sudden, maybe half an hour later, 2 plainclothes officers came in, and I recognized one of them. He's a well-known undercover narcotics officer. And, excuse me, he talked with me normally for a little bit, talked about if I was selling drugs or not, asked about my phone, because they seized my phone and my laptop. And then after talking for about a couple minutes, he asked me if I knew Jeremy. And I said, yeah, of course I do. And he said, do you know that he's dead? And I kind of had a denial for a second. Like, I thought this was some kind of game or something, because, this doesn't happen in real life, chained to a table in an interview room, realizing that your friend's dead. And then he said, yeah, we looked at the phone records, and the night that he passed away, you were the last person he talked to. And not only that, but we have we have records from text messages that he bought it off you. And I just kind of just broke down right there. Like, I didn't know what to feel, what to think, what to do. I remember just being stunned, and the officer asked me if I wanted to write a letter to the family, and my mind was still just shattered. I couldn't really think right. I don't remember what I wrote in the letter, but I knew that whatever I did, nothing could ever make up for taking someone's life, and I felt like a murderer. I committed the worst thing ever, and to someone that I cared about. And I asked the officer that, they gave me some time to myself, because I was really upset. It finally sunk in. And I remember asking him, how am I supposed to live with myself after this? And he said, you'll have to find a way yourself. And I guess they ended up transferring me to Ventura County Jail, and I went there for a couple of days. And they ended up not taking me to court. They released me. My case was pending. I guess they were trying to decide because they had raided my house, thinking that maybe I was cooking meth. For some reason, they thought that I was a meth dealer. I was a big dealer. So they raided my house. They broke down every door in my mother's house, and they didn't find anything. So I thought, okay. But I also thought about Jeremy, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that he really died. It really sunk in, and I thought that I'm dead, if I don't go to jail for the rest of my life, I might as well just kill myself, because that's not something I could live with. And that's genuinely how I felt, waiting, not knowing what's going to happen after they released me, because I was very sick. And the first thing I did was call my dealer, because it was just so painful. It wasn't just about being sick. I wanted to drown everything out the way I was feeling right then and there. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted so many times to reach out to you guys, but I was so scared. I was terrified. I wanted to be punished. I really did. I wanted to be punished, but I knew that even if that happened, it wouldn't be enough. He was an amazing person, and it's been a thing in my life. The people that are inspirational, the good people that I know, like, they're always the ones that pass away. And, that happened to me before with people that I was really close with, and it was so painful. And just knowing that I was responsible for this one, it just ruined me. So after a while, when I got out of jail, my family stepped in. They're like, this is it. So they took a big role. They cleaned out my room. They wouldn't let me go in my room. I slept in my mother's room for a couple of days. Then my brother moved me to his house after I was a little bit stronger to where I could eat and I wasn't throwing up in front of the kids.
Right. And did your family know that, you had sold a drug that ultimately killed somebody? Did they know
Yeah.
that?
My father came when I was released, and in the lobby of the jail, I started crying. I was like, they said I killed him, Dad. They said I killed him. I remember saying that, and I was just crying. My dad held me probably for the first time ever, He held me, and I just cried. And, a lot of people told me, he would have got it either way. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen. It's not your fault. And it's not true. The fact is, I was the one that sold to him. And that's something that I'll have to live with the rest of my life. And, I thought I should just end it, an eye for an eye. So eventually, once I gained the trust of my family, I relapsed. I tried to overdose because I thought my tolerance was low enough, and I passed out in the shower, I guess, for 4 hours is what my niece told me. My mom was screaming at the door, and my brother found out and kicked me out of the house. I went back to my house, and I tried to hang myself. We have these light fixture hangers. They hang like chandeliers.
Right.
And I hung a rope on it, and I tested my weight, and it held me. So I put it around my neck, and I stepped off, and the whole thing just snapped. And I was mad. I was mad because I wanted to die, but I was such a coward to, cut myself or do anything that would cause me any more pain, because I was a coward. And finally, I thought, I just need to turn my life around. So I fought really hard. I remember writing in the letter to you that I'm going to fight to get clean, and I remembered saying that. So I really wanted to put more effort in. So I sought a therapist, I saw a drug addiction counselor as well. So I saw a therapist, and I was on medication assisted treatment, but I still didn't want to go to rehab. I was
Mhm.
doing okay. I would relapse and then I would go back, but little by little it wasn't as difficult for me, but the guilt would always come back. I was even before Jeremy died, like I was
Mhm.
plagued by guilt, causing strife in my family and them fighting over money because I asked for money
Right.
or the things I do, which is a vicious circle that heroin causes. It takes
Mhm.
all the color out of your life. It really does. And finally, in December, I had a knock at the door. And at this point, I was working. I was doing, I guess, a lot better, well, for myself. I was almost, I would say, almost clean, but I would still use every once in a while. But I saw the police at the door, and I thought, maybe they just want to question me or something, or this is it, because I was expecting it. I knew, and I wanted justice for Jeremy. So I opened the door, and they told me that they had a federal indictment for my arrest, and they
Mhm.
took me in, and I didn't know what to expect or anything. I found out that my maximum was 20 years, and I there's
And
things
what was
worse than death. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what was the charge? What were you actually charged with?
Um, the only charge they ended up giving me, they were considering, I think, involuntary manslaughter, but they ended up giving me one count of sale of heroin. But
Mhm.
I think my saving grace was that everyone on the indictment had like large amounts. The other guy from the local county, if you look at the info online, I think he had a pound of heroin and a gram of fentanyl. When I was caught, I had under 2 grams of heroin. So for them to call me a big time dealer when I had that little of an amount, and I think the detectives wrote a note to them, to the judge maybe. I heard something like that from my attorney. I Even the first time I got arrested, the detective just said I need help. So eventually, after spending about a little less than a month in a pretty bad county jail in San Bernardino, I was not released. I was released to the custody of pretrial officer, which is part of a federal program. They decided to place me in a rehab. So they put me in a rehab, and I did 7 months there. And still, at this point, I'm still dealing with the guilt. I wanted to die. Wasn't I wasn't healing, even though I was clean. I was just in so much pain. But they gave me the tools there, to kind of accept what happened and move past it, and not, instead of trying to make up for Jeremy, maybe try to save someone else and prevent that from happening to someone else, because no parent should outlive their child. That's that's something that should never happen, and I still feel it. If there was anything I could do, if I could give my life for his, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I wish I had the power to do something like that. I really do, because he had so much potential. The inspiration when he wanted to be an EMT, in his uniform when he came to get cigarettes, that's how I remember him. And me, I was a scumbag. I was, just barely getting by, just doing drugs, wasting away. I didn't care about anything. I didn't want to see anyone. As long as I had my drugs, I didn't even bother going out.
Mhm.
But at the rehab, they slowly built me up, and I got a little confidence. My depression faded away a little bit, but eventually I did 4 months there, and then I ended up working there for 3 months, and eventually I got kicked out for making a bad choice with a girl,
Mhm.
and I was sent home, and I was put on house arrest for 6 months. So I was confined to my house besides work, and they still have the charge hanging over my head. So if I mess this up, I still face up to 20 years. I can still get resentenced. But I was still torn because I want justice for Jeremy. I really do. I want I was mad, all these articles about the delivery service, about all these drug dealers, and not once was his name mentioned in there. And I've read some articles. I know his sister did something at the high school for him, and that's great and all that, but this whole case was from was the result of him. I feel he should have, some recognition. I feel his name should be out there. I feel people should know that even $20 worth of heroin can kill you. I mean, people think that, you know, like how drug addicts think, especially heroin addicts. Oh, like the heroin in Washington, there's a lot of people overdosing and dying, and then they'll move over there because they think that's where the high quality stuff is. But the truth is, you think it won't happen to you, and then it does, or even worse, you think you're helping a friend out, and really you're murdering him.
Mhm.
And it's that's the reality of it. You're not helping anyone. You're helping destroy someone else's life, and it's not just his life. It's the lives of the families.
Yeah, it
It,
doesn't affect one person. It's the whole group, the whole
yeah.
family, the whole group of friends. You know, it's a lot. So,
It,
Chris, today, are you sober?
I've been sober since December 28th, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on prescription medications for depression and anxiety, but I am on no mind-altering substances. I'm regularly drug tested. I'm still on outpatient. I'm proud to say that I'm sober. I still have a lot to learn. I still have a lot of challenges. I still have a lot of bad days. I still have those urges, I might for the rest of my life, but as a person, I do feel stronger than before. I think now, instead of feeling like I need to die to try to make up for Jeremy, maybe I could try to save someone by putting a message like this out there.
Mm-hmm.
Your friend goes to rehab and comes out. Other people might just be thinking about making money. Other people might have ulterior motives. Don't don't do that. If that person's your friend, even if you have to be mean, even if they get upset, just say no. Just help them stay clean. If only I had done that, none of this would have happened, and God knows what he would have became. Because he was an amazing person. He really was. And I think I can't I can't say that people can learn from that because that's not fair. He's not something to teach other people's lessons. He was a great human being. The little time that I spent talking with him, like I knew right away, like he had a lot of potential, and he was a really kind soul. And it it still hurts. I'm still seeing a therapist. I still deal with it a lot. I still bring it up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Facing you was very difficult, especially at my sentencing. Um, for a month or 2 months after, I was really torn. But after that, I started to feel a little stronger. I think I think you helped me more than you can imagine, and that tore me up inside because here, here you are consoling me now, and that just made me feel so much worse. I still feel like I should be punished. I still have that feeling. I still have my depression. I still have my days where I feel completely drained and I don't even want to get out of bed. But I'm clean. So I know there's a lot of things I could do, and I know I have color in my life now. I know my family wants me around. They love me now. So there's a lot to be grateful for, and I don't only see the darkness or negativity anymore. Getting
Mm-hmm.
getting clean, especially from heroin, after that, you feel like you could conquer the world. You really do. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to take those steps, and it's really hard to maintain it. But if you can, it's really it can lead you down so many different paths. There's so many resources available that people don't realize. I always thought that there was no help. In our county, there's less help than Los Angeles, but Los Angeles has drug Medi-Cal. There's a lot of resources available. There's places where there's a waiting list, unfortunately, but if you want the help, all you have to do is go ask for it and get it. They'll find you housing. They'll even pay for it. We've had people lay at the on the stairs outside until we open up, and actually the director gave in and gave him a bed, moved him up and gave him a bed because this guy came there every day for a couple of days and he would sleep there, and he was in really bad shape. These counselors at Impact, are all ex-drug addicts. They've all been there, and that's a big thing. I feel like it's important to understand, in order to help someone, because that's our biggest defense against our family is like we think that you don't understand because you're normal. You don't know what it's like to be an addict. You don't know how painful it is, blah blah blah. And that's another one of our mechanisms, just like getting defensive or getting mad when you put us on the spot or try to bring up using. I'm not sure how your interactions with Jeremy was when he when you confronted him about using, but it's a pattern with a lot of users. We get defensive, we get angry, try to change the subject or walk away and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it changes you. It makes you into a different person. It really takes over like your whole being.
Right. I know. I understand. I've seen it firsthand. And, that's why we started this foundation is to help those that are left behind still
Uh-huh.
suffering from heroin addiction. So,
Right.
you and I have come a long way. And
Uh-huh.
um, in my heart, knowing Jeremy, the only reason I would talk to you is because I know that's what Jeremy would want. And he was so full of compassion. And he always would say, Mom,
Yeah.
these small town dealers are addicts themselves. And they're not really dealers. They just, front others a small amount to keep them from getting sick. And they
Yeah,
don't do it
and
for the money, like the
no,
big drug dealers who I have absolutely no compassion for, no sympathy for. Um, and I know you were an addict. And in that sense, you were the same as Jeremy, and very imperfect, but very plagued. And I
yeah,
saw his struggle. I saw him go to rehab and rehab and rehab, and we were there every step of the way. And so I get it. So the reason I can talk to you is because of Jeremy and the person he was, you know?
yeah, uh and
And
a lot of, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and you know, I'm working on healing too. I mean, this is a constant daily thing, but carrying around hate in my heart for you is not going to get me better. And by you coming on the show and telling your story and being like truly remorseful for your acts, I have to respect that. I have to give you that respect because you certainly could have gone the other way and said, he was just a druggie and, he wanted it. He got what he deserved. Everybody knows that,
No, no
it's a risky
way.
thing. I know. And you were very decent about it. And, I kind of do appreciate that. And your message, you said you want to help save lives, then you got to keep telling your message that, even fronting $20 worth of heroin can be a death sentence. And then
It
now you
is.
carry around that guilt the rest of your life, I can't.
Yeah, and
You don't need to be in jail to be tortured.
no,
So,
I'm in jail in my head. Like that's something I learned at Impact as well. You don't have to be behind bars to be in jail.
right?
I've been I've been in jail for a
Mm-hmm.
long time mentally, and dealing is dealing even if you don't realize it, helping your friend out because he's sick and giving him $20 worth, that's still a drug dealer. So
Well,
anyone doing that, you're selling drugs. It's no there's no argument about it. You're being a drug dealer.
you are.
I yeah, I wasn't a big time drug dealer. I wasn't looking for profit. I thought I was helping a friend. But ultimately, I was selling drugs. And that's it should be a sign. If you're not able to get it, then don't do it. Just try to quit. Try to get through that day. It'll get better. It really does. For me, I thought it was the end of the world when I couldn't get it on some days, but it
Right.
really isn't, because maybe that's someone telling you that it's time to quit. I've had
Mm-hmm.
I've had like, I wasn't raised on religion, but I've had so many signs in my life. I've gotten away with so much, especially driving on a suspended license with no insurance and fake tags. And police let me go for that.
Yeah.
Um, with Jeremy's situation, I can't call it lucky because, like I said, I'm torn. Of course I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail, but also I want justice for him. I don't think that's fair at all. It's not. It's not fair. But that's something, I have to live with. So if there's anything I could do to help, if I could prevent this from happening, I would like nothing more to try
Mm-hmm.
to redeem myself even a little bit, to try to save someone even a little bit. I have social anxiety. I'm not good at public speaking. I'm really reserved. I keep to myself a lot. I've
Mm-hmm.
changed so much since I've become a drug addict, but I felt like I had to tell the story, like something forced me to. And I would have panic attacks when I shared at meetings. I couldn't breathe, but it
Yeah.
got easier. And I want to tell the story. I want people to know.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, because these things we don't think about. It changes everyone. It affects more than one person. It affects families. It affects more than dozens of people in just a moment. And all you have to do is use common sense. A good friend coming out of rehab, why would you sell to him knowing that he just came out of rehab, knowing that he had been before? And that's, in hindsight, thinking about all these things, and I still think about it from time to time, and it's a terrible thing, and it's not even just about that for other people. You shouldn't be sharing your drugs because you don't know what's in it. If you're used to it and your other friend is getting a weaker amount, he can overdose and die. And a lot of people, maybe they're scared. There's stories. People just throw their friends on the floor in front of the hospital and drive away because they don't want to get caught. They don't want to get in trouble. They're doing that to their friends.
I know.
And that's the kind of people that heroin turns them into.
Right. Well, it's a very dangerous lifestyle, needless to say. It's a sick lifestyle, and it's a very damaging lifestyle. But you haven't overdosed, you haven't died, and you've been using a lot longer than Jeremy ever did, and there's a reason you're being kept alive, and I think you say you want to help others and turn your life around. Well, you've been given the opportunity, and that's a gift. It really is. But anyway, I want to thank you for participating today.
Of course.
And helping us get the message out there and educate the public about what addiction is really like, the torturous life that it is. And, let people know that we're here to help. We are here to help. There's other organizations like us, and people just have to reach out,
Yeah, and there's one more thing I'd like to say too. Even with the boredom out here, I feel like people made too big of a deal about these drugs. I remember the first time I did cocaine, and I heard stories that you could die instantly from doing cocaine. And when I did it, my thought was, that's it. And in my head, I thought that, people just lied. They just made a big deal about it. So it was really nothing. I think that making too big of a deal about something can be really hazardous. But in the case of heroin, it's not just about, oh, you're gonna die instantly from snorting it. No, you really will die. This isn't something that's one in a million. Look at the statistics. I mean, how many people? It's the most cause of death now, isn't it? Overdose death is the greatest cause of death in the United States now.
Well, you have to realize that cocaine, when you were doing it when you were a teenager, or even 3 years ago, is not the same. Okay, there's so many drugs that are laced with fentanyl. So when you say, "Oh, people can't instantly die from it," that's exactly what happened to Jeremy. He died from it. So, with everything being tainted nowadays, you never know what you're getting, whether it's cocaine, Xanax, heroin. It's all tainted. So much of it is. And, I think that's what people really have to realize.
Yeah, exactly. That was my thought was, back then, I thought people just, kind of lied. With cigarettes, the anti-smoking campaign, they over-exaggerate, almost like in politics. And that's how I felt about it. But, a more honest approach With
Right.
heroin, like the proof is all there.
Mhm.
It's nothing like the other drugs, but it's being the biggest problem right now. These people like shouldn't try it, and I'm hearing kids in elementary school doing pills now.
Mhm.
People are starting younger and younger, and it's not going to lead them down a good path,
Right.
like
Right.
where I started and where I ended, I never would have thought that. I had so many dreams. I thought, I wanted to be SWAT team. I wanted to go in the military, and this took everything from me. It took my drive. My
Yep.
girlfriend and my drug addiction took away everything. I thought I was content. I stopped pursuing school. I was lucky I graduated high school. I barely graduated high school, but I'm
Mhm.
I'm in my 30s, and I'm just barely, I've been clean almost, I'll be 2 years in December clean, and I'm going back to school to try to, get my life together and get a career. Meanwhile, I have friends that, they're married, they have families, they have great careers.
Right.
I threw away so much of my life on these drugs, and
Yeah, but
you
Chris, you
know,
still have your life. You still have your
yeah,
life. So, I mean, it's about where you go from here, not where you've been, you know?
yeah, that's
So,
that's
you
definitely true.
yeah, you have a
It's
chance
just,
to turn it around.
yeah, it's
But
just the past. Like even if the overdose doesn't happen to you, it'll happen to someone close to you. It'll
mhm.
affect you, and even if you're one of the fortunate or unfortunate ones that live, you'll end up in a situation where you're just as miserable. Like I can't say I'm content with my life. I can't say I'm happy with what I've done with my life, and
Mhm.
that's my main point. If I
Mhm.
could go back and do everything over, and unfortunately, there's no way to do that.
No. Yeah. Not in Jeremy's case anyway, if that's what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Oh,
But
yeah,
anyway,
that, everything.
well, thank you for your time,
Uh-huh.
and we're going to wrap it up. So,
Okay.
thanks again, and I hope people out there are listening to your message and learn something from it.
Yeah, I hope I said something helpful at least.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to say a lot more, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not very good on the spot like this. But okay, definitely. Thank you very much.
You just heard the podcast $20, produced by Rose and Rebecca Castro and Bridget McQuay, recorded at the New Media Agency Studios in Los Angeles.